Good morning, welcome to the channel. My name is Nathan, and today I'm presenting build number 9, a build I'm entitling the Dreadlord. This build in particular, you're going to be this heavily armored frontline juggernaut, just putting the fear of yourself into your enemies. And overall, this build's going to be super fun, very thematic. It's October, and this build will be very appropriate for that. So here is our agenda for today. I'll be introducing and talking about the build concept. I'll talk about level 1, levels 2 through 6, levels 7 through 9, 10 through 13, 14 through 17, before summarizing. And at each of those key thresholds at levels 6, 9, 13, and 17, I will do a report on the damage and kind of tactics of what the character will be doing. Now, for our agenda and our introduction and build concept, we have a little bit longer one today, but this is going to be a melee controller build using a polearm. I'm going to go for a glaive, but you can use a halberd if you want, using the fear mechanic. Now, in particular, the frightened condition in 5th edition, a creature that is frightened cannot move closer to the source of its fear and has disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls while the source of its fear is in its line of sight. This build will combine durability thanks to heavy armor and the way the fear mechanic works with control and damage per round. Now, this isn't going to be a damage per round primary focused character, but I'm going to be kind of presenting the damage per round this character outputs. There also, another interesting thing about this character, there's a lot of progression options and paths you can take once your core features are established. When I was designing this build, it was tricky because of the amount of interesting things I wanted to do with it. But ultimately, I think I've arrived on something that not only fits our concept, but also is going to be powerful and fun to play. Now, this is a 5-book build. It requires the player's handbook, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, as well as Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, which I'm going to be pulling our race from today. Now, you absolutely do not need all of these. You could pull off the build with the player's handbook, Xanathar's, Tasha's, and Van Richten's, but one of our subclasses is from Van Richten, so you will need that. Now, there are 2 main build paths that I kind of found here, and they are pretty identical in some ways up to about level 13. Now, the one that I'm going to be presenting today is the strength-focused one, and on this one in particular, we basically go up until level 13 with 12 Paladin levels and 1 level in our Warlock subclass before finishing in Paladin. Now, an alternative route here is to go a more charisma-focused character. And on this one, the build pretty much is going to be very similar up until level 14, except we're going to be putting our attributes into charisma instead of strength. Now, this build will sacrifice some of the capabilities of the other build. You'll end up using a quarterstaff on this version of the build. You'll make sacrifices in your strength to improve your save DC by boosting your charisma, and eventually we will get charisma focused attacks, but this build doesn't really do that until level 15. And while you could do it earlier, it sacrifices some of the core features of what this build is about. Now, in particular, this build is about combining the Undead Warlock's form of dread, which lets you once per turn attempt to frighten an enemy on a hit with an attack roll, with the Conquest Paladin's aura that they get at level 7, which makes it so that any creature that's frightened of you within 10 feet has their speed reduced to 0 and takes damage at the start of their turn. So if you can frighten a creature and they are 10 feet away from you and they have a reach of 5 feet, they can't attack you, and but you can attack them and they're effectively controlled. So the charisma version of this build is better at making enemies frightened, but it's going to have a harder time hitting, and there's some kind of range issues and that kind of thing that I'll get into later. Nonetheless, some things to consider here. So the Fear spell in particular, which Conquest Paladins will get, is incredibly powerful, especially when combined with the Conquest Paladins aura. Anyone that you successfully frighten with that spell will essentially lose their turn as long as they're in your aura and won't be able to do anything about it. I'm going to be planning on using a dragonborn race here, and we're going to be getting the Dragon Fear feat. And this is a nice feat in that it gives a big area of effect fear, potentially. But every time the target takes damage, they get to repeat the saving throw. And if you're going to be hitting one target, they'll basically this feat won't work. And if they're in the aura and slowed, they'll get to make the saving throw at the start of their turn, which again is not ideal, but this one in particular, I'm planning on taking this feat for the kind of AoE fear that it will provide, and you will use this to control a group rather than your primary target. Now, our form of dread that we're going to get from Undead Warlock, it forces one save per our turn, and it lasts until the end of our next turn, and this is going to be generally our most reliable way. And then we also have a Conquering Presence, Channel Divinity, which takes our action. It has the same AoE as the Dragon Fear feat, but they get to save at the end of each of their turn. And all of the save DCs are based on charisma. So if you're going to be boosting your strength, then you have the issue of your save DC flatlines. But if you boost your charisma to help your save DC, you have the issue of now your attacks and your damage per round aren't as good. We also can't take Hexblade to become single attribute dependent in charisma immediately, because that locks us away from getting the form of dread out of Undead Warlock. So let's talk about level 1 and how we're going to progress this character. So we're going to start in Paladin. Now, as a Paladin, we get proficiency with all armor and shields. We're going to be planning on using heavy armor. We get proficiency in pretty much all weapons, and we're going to be planning on using a polearm in this build. We also get Divine Sense, which lets us detect the presence of undead and fiends and celestials and that kind of thing, and Lay on Hands, which gives us a pool equal to 5 times our Paladin level that we can use to restore health as an action to ourselves or an ally. And we can use any number of the points out of that pool, and we can spend 5 points out of that pool to cure a disease. Paladins also get proficiency in wisdom saves and charisma saves, and this is nice, and wisdom saves are important, especially later in the game. Now, for our race, I'm going to be picking the Dragonborn, particularly the Gem Dragonborn, and I'm going to pick Emerald. You can pick whatever color you want, out of Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. So we are going to be this Dragonborn Paladin, covered in heavy armor and being overall a very frightening character. Now, this character, I cannot see them being a good aligned character. You are best going to be you're at best probably going to be lawful neutral, maybe lawful evil. This build is particularly appropriate for a villain that the party might face, so consider that. But if you are playing this character for their story, I imagine that you are going to be in the service of some kind of undead patron. You're going to be basically sworn to conquer the world in the name of your patron. And while this is a powerful story, it is a little bit of a dark one. So your story considerations, if you're going to be playing this character, depending on your party composition, are going to be very important. Now, other races that you could consider here, the Eladrin out of Monsters of the Multiverse can potentially get a fear effect when they teleport. I think a Githyanki Conquest Paladin pledge to Vlaakith would be extremely appropriate for this build. They don't really have anything in particular that contributes, although their features are nice, but thematically they would be perfect. The Githzerai race out of Monsters of the Multiverse gets the shield spell, which can be very helpful. And finally, the Bugbear, actually out of Monsters of the Multiverse, I would use this one if you want to lean heavier into your damage per round and want to use a quarterstaff with the dueling fighting style later instead of defense, which I'll talk about, specifically because they get an extra 5 feet of reach on their turn. This will mean that we can attack a target from 10 feet away, and if they're in the aura and frightened, they won't be able to move, and they won't be able to attack us because we're 10 feet away if they only have a 5-foot reach. And this will let you get around the downsides of using the quarterstaff in terms of reach, but having all the upsides of the quarterstaff in terms of damage versus the glaive. So those are some other ones I would recommend for a build like this. Now, as a dragonborn, we get a breath weapon in a 15-foot cone. Its save DC is going to be based on our constitution, and it'll do 1d10 of the damage type we chose. For emerald dragonborns, gem dragonborns in particular, this is going to be psychic damage. We also get resistance to our associated type, so we will be resistant to psychic damage, which I think is very appropriate for this character. Gem Dragonborns get a psionic mind feature, which lets them telepathically communicate with creatures within 30 feet. You don't have to share a language; you just have to. And it's overall a nice flavor feature, and it's been fun to use in campaigns when I've played Dragonborns. And at level 5, Dragonborns will get the ability to fly for 1 minute once per long rest, and this is quite powerful and pretty fun. Now, for our starting abilities, like I said, we're going to be doing the strength-oriented version of this build. I'm going to, all of these scores are generated using the point buy method. We're going to be taking a 15 in strength and put our +2 there. We're going to get a 14 in constitution, a 10 in wisdom, and a 15 in charisma with our +1 there. If you want to go the charisma-focused version of the build, just swap your bonuses to strength and charisma. So you'll start with a 16 versus a 17 in strength, and a 17 versus a 16 in charisma. Now, we're not going to be boosting those for a while, so depending on your build path, things will feel very similar at the early levels. Our starting hit points will be 12, 10 from being a paladin, +2 from our constitution. For our starting equipment, you want to take the items offered by your class here. I would take a glaive or a halberd, your choice, and then I would take a quarterstaff, a shield, chainmail, and a holy symbol. You're going to eventually want to get plate, but this weapon selection will give you access to either the melee, like the close range focus version with the staff and the shield, or the longer reach version with the glaive and the halberd, depending on what choice you want to make. You won't have to make this choice until character level 3. So at level 2, we are going to take our Warlock dip now, immediately. And as a Warlock at level 1, we get Pact Magic, which is the Warlock's version of spellcasting. We have a limited number of spell slots that are all the same level, but they come back on a short rest. And we also get our Otherworldly Patron. And we are going to be taking the Undead Patron out of Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. This pact has you pledge to an undead being of some kind. They suggest maybe like a lich or a mummy or the Lich Queen Vlaakith, that kind of thing. You can kind of pick whatever you want. I think for my story, I might pick a lich or something like that. Perhaps their goals are less nefarious and might be acceptable to the rest of your party. So all Warlock patrons provide you with an expanded spell list, and in particular, undead Warlocks get Bane and False Life added to their spell list, and they also get the Form of Dread feature. This is a pretty cool feature. What it does is, as a bonus action, we can activate it, and we transform for 1 minute, perhaps taking on an aspect of our undead patron. I think maybe on this build we manifest some kind of, faint ethereal crown and maybe armor and things like that on top of our armor. And when we activate it, we get temporary hit points equal to 1d10 plus our Warlock level. And then the first time, once on each of our turns, when we hit an enemy with an attack roll, this can be a spell attack or a weapon attack, we can force them to make a wisdom saving throw. The DC will be our spell DC. And if they fail, they are frightened of us until the end of our next turn. And then we are also immune to the frightened condition while we're in our transformation. Now, importantly, what this will mean is that while this is active and we bonk someone, they can either attack us at disadvantage, like we talked about earlier, how the fear condition works, or they can run away. But if you're using a reach weapon and have a reach of 10 feet, they can't attack you if their reach is only 5 feet. So their choices will be to attack someone else, or they can disengage and run away. If they don't disengage, you'll get to attack them since they leave your reach. And this is going to be our primary control option. Now, for our spells that we get as a Warlock, 1, we get 2 cantrips. I would take Booming Blade and Eldritch Blast. Booming Blade is a little tricky to use with reach weapons in particular because it requires the target to be within 5 feet of you. So you could potentially Booming Blade your target with your Form of Dread active and then step back, taking an opportunity attack, which might be at disadvantage. And then if the target moved away from you, even if they disengage, they take some extra damage. And this is a viable tactic. It's a little risky given that you're provoking an opportunity attack, and you can solve this with feats. Like, for example, if you get the mobile feat, then they won't get to attack you. But this build is going to be kind of feat capped, and if you're going to use something like custom lineage to get a feat, you could take the mobile feat to solve this. But later on, it's not going to be an issue. So I don't think leaning too heavily into Booming Blade is going to be worth it. But it's a good thing to have around. And for the spells that you know at this level, I would pick Hex and Bane off of the expanded spell list. Bane gives enemies a 1d4 penalty to attack rolls and saving throws if they fail their initial save. And if you have this active, it'll be easier for yourself and your allies to land control spells or control effects like the Form of Dread. Now, at level 3, we are going to be a Paladin level 2, and we're going to be taking Paladin levels the rest of the way on this version of the build. Now, as a Paladin, at level 2, we get our fighting style. Now, you have two main options here. If you want to use your two-handed reach weapon, I would take the defense fighting style. But if you want to use a quarterstaff with a shield, I would take the dueling fighting style. So the advantage of the dueling fighting style here is you're actually going to do a little bit more damage and have a higher AC by 1 point thanks to having a shield. But you lose the reach. So it's up to you kind of what you want to do with that. If you don't have the reach, your targets potentially will be able to retaliate, unless of course you're a bugbear and have that extra reach. We also get the Paladin spellcasting here, and we can prepare a number of spells equal to half our Paladin level rounded down, plus our Charisma modifier, so that would be 4 at this level. We also get Divine Smite. This lets us expend a spell slot on a hit with a melee weapon to do extra damage equal to the spell slot we spend plus 1, and that's how many d8s of radiant damage that we will do. I will be planning on using this whenever we get a crit, and when you need extra damage, this is a great feature to have. And of course, our Lay on Hands is now at 10 points. We have 2 first level spell slots plus our extra first level spell slot that comes back on a short rest from Warlock. And the Paladin spells I would prepare here are Bless. This is our main concentration option. This will give us and some other allies a d4 bonus to our attack rolls and saving throws, and I'm planning on using this. And then I would also prepare here Wrathful Smite and Thunderous Smite. These give us a push and a fear option, although it does take our concentration, but it's nice to have around, as well as the command spell for additional control. Now, at level 4, we are going to be a Paladin 3, and this is the level where we get our Divine Oath and will become a Conquest Paladin. We also get Divine Health at this level, which makes us immune to disease and that kind of thing, which is a great ribbon feature. And we get the Harness Divine Power feature, which lets us burn our Channel Divinity to recover a spell slot. You might use this, but we might also be using one of our subclass-specific Channel Divinities. Now, as a Conquest Paladin, we get the Tenets of Conquest seared onto our upper arm. And these are to douse the flame of hope, rule with an iron fist, and strength above all. Now, as you can imagine, being a Conquest Paladin and pledged to an undead patron, like I said, you're probably not going to be a good character, likely lawful neutral or lawful evil. You are going to be, when you defeat an enemy, you will defeat them utterly and extinguish all their hope for the rest of their life if they even survive. So, again, it might be a good fit for the right kind of party or a bad guy. Just take that into consideration. Now, our Channel Divinity options that we get as a Conquest Paladin, we get Conquering Presence, which as an action, we exude a powerful, menacing presence, and all creatures of our choice that can see us within 30 feet of us will have to make a Wisdom save against our spell save DC. So 8 plus our proficiency modifier plus our charisma. And if they fail, they are frightened of us for 1 minute, and they get to repeat the saving throw at the end of each of their turns. We also get the Guided Strike option, which lets us add a plus 10 bonus to one of our attack rolls. And we get to decide after we see the result of the roll, but before the DM says whether it hits or misses. So if you've got an important hit that you need to land, this is a great thing for that. Now, we also get a couple spells that are always prepared from our oath, and those are are going to be Armor of Agathis and Command. So with Command always prepared, you can prepare a different spell and pick whatever you want. Next level, at level 5, we are going to be a 4th level Paladin, and we get our first ability score increase or feat. And we're going to be taking the Polearm Master feat here. What this does is if you're wielding the right kind of polearm, you get to make you can make an opportunity attack when an enemy enters your reach, which is great. And then you can also make a bonus action attack with the haft of your polearm if you took the attack action during your turn. And importantly, the haft carries all the properties of whatever weapon you're using. So if you're using a reach weapon, your haft attack will also have reach. So this gives us a reliable way to weaponize our bonus action and will help our damage per round, as well as giving us, that opportunity attack when enemies enter our reach. Now, as a 5th level character, we also get our Gem Flight feature from our race here, as well as our breath weapon from our race increases to 2d10 damage. And our spells haven't changed. And at level 6, we are going to be a 5th level Paladin. This means we get the extra attack feature, so we can attack twice instead of once when we take the attack action on our turn. And this, combined with Polearm Master, means that we're going to be getting 3 attacks per turn when we're doing our damage per round. Now, we also get 2nd level spells here, and this is fantastic, but there's a lot of reasonable ones like Aid and that kind of thing, but the main thing that we want is Find Steed. This will give us a horse, specifically a war horse that follows us around, doesn't require concentration or anything like that. And any spell that we cast while mounted on the steed that only targets us also gets to target the steed. Now, we're not going to be using this specific aspect for a while, but importantly, I'm going to assume going forward that we have this cast from a previous day and the spell slot is thus available, and we have our war horse follower around. Now, we also get Hold Person and Spiritual Weapon, always prepared as a Conquest Paladin. And these are pretty good spells. You can lock down humanoids with Hold Person. And while Spiritual Weapon is reasonable at this level, I wouldn't plan on using it too much going forward. We would rather make our attacks with our polearm haft. But level 6 is time for what would normally be our first damage report. However, this character is a control-focused character, so I'm going to do a tactics report here. I will talk about their damage per round numbers, but again, this is mainly a control build with some damage per round. So, what are our tactics here? So in the first round, we're going to cast Bless, targeting probably ourselves and our best allies. Now, I'm going to be assuming that we're going to be targeting our warhorse, but in a real game, it might be better to target some of your allies who are going to be making attacks. And we're going to activate our Form of Dread. And then in round 2 and beyond, we're going to pick our target, attack them twice, and then attack them again with our haft. Now, you also can use Bane to debuff your enemies instead, especially if you have an ally who's already casting Bless. This will make it easier for you to land your Form of Dread Fear because they'll get that penalty to their saving throws. You can cast Command as needed to kind of control your enemies if you have the spell slots, as well as potentially using Wrathful or Thunderous Smites if you're not going to use Bless. So our damage here, we are getting 2 attacks with our glaive, doing 1d6, with a 1d6 plus 1d4 to hit, and a 1d10 plus 3 damage. 1 attack with our haft, same to hit bonus, but a d4 plus 3 damage. And then once per our turn, we force our target to make a DC 14 wisdom save or be frightened of us. We have a potential to do 3d8 divine smites on crits. And we have our warhorse, who will be doing 2d6 plus 4 damage if they hit. So our damage per round against a target with an armor class of 10 or plus 0 to their save is 36.9. And against an enemy with an AC of 15 and plus 5 to their saves, it will be 29.4. Now, this is honestly not bad, but it is not up to the measure of the dedicated damage per round builds I've built to this point. If you were going for a more damage per round focus build, obviously something like Hexblade would be a lot better, and using other races to get extra feats. So you might be able to doing Polearm Master plus Great Arm Master, or getting advantage with something would help a lot. This build does not have a reliable way to get advantage on our attacks, and doing so would considerably boost your DPR. If your table uses the variant flanking rules, which are optional, you could potentially flank with yourself by using your warhorse, and this would significantly help your damage per round. So your tactics should take into consideration what rule variants your table is playing with, as always. But I'm not going to be counting on your table using that rule. Now, moving on to level 7. At level 7, we are going to be a Paladin 6, and this means we get Aura of Protection. This is, not an offensive feature, but it's arguably one of the best class features in all of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. What this does is you extend an aura 10 feet around you that provides you and any of your allies within it a bonus to all their saving throws equal to your charisma modifier. So now we get an extra +3 to all our saves, and increases to our charisma will further improve this. Very powerful feature, and even though it doesn't show up in damage spreadsheets, this helps the survivability of yourself and your party considerably. Now, level 8, we are a Paladin 7, and now we are fully online because we just got Aura of Conquest. So what this does, this is a 10-foot aura, so same radius as Aura of Protection. But while in the aura, so creatures frightened of you have their speed reduced to 0. They're not, they can still, try to move and that kind of thing, but their speed is 0. And they take psychic damage equal to our Paladin level over 2 when they start their turn in the aura. Now, combined with the Form of Dread, you've got a somewhat reliable fear on hit, and if you, frighten an enemy, they won't be able to move, and if they don't have reach, they won't be able to attack us because we're attacking from 10 feet away, and they'll just stand there. They can't move closer to us, they can't move away because they have no speed, and they're going to be stuck. And combining this with our various fear effects is going to be huge, and it's kind of the core of this build. And getting this online as soon as possible was one of my main goals for this build, and now we've got it, and we are very happy here. At level 9, we are at Paladin 8, and we get our next ability score increase or feat, and we're going to be picking up Dragon Fear. This is a racial specific feat out of Xanathar's, and it is a half feat, so it lets us improve our strength, constitution, or charisma by 1. We're going to bump our strength on this version of the build. If you're doing the charisma focus version, you would bump your charisma here, and you would have 18 charisma and 16 strength. But what this does is this lets us replace a use of our breath weapon with a menacing roar, which exudes 30 feet in all directions, forces the targets to make a wisdom save against what will be our spell save DC. It's charisma focused, so if you had this on another build, it would still use charisma. But it is 8 plus our charisma plus our proficiency. And any creature that fails their save is frightened of you for 1 minute, and they get to repeat the saving throw whenever they take damage. So this gives us that somewhat reliable AoE fear, and importantly, with the Fizzban's version of the Dragonborn, who can replace one of their attacks with their breath weapon, we can now replace one of our attacks with Dragon Fear rather than spending our whole action doing it. And this is one reason why I wanted to use the Fizzban's Dragonborn in particular, was this combo, and this will potentially let us reliably control a group of enemies. Now, of course, if you, land this and you position as many targets as you can in your aura, they'll take the psychic damage at the start of their turn, but they will also, get to make the save at the start of their turn. So that's a little bit, it sucks a little bit, but, if enemies have low wisdom, they probably won't be landing that save, and this potentially lets you fear even more enemies. And so that's a reason I am taking it here. And yeah, we are very happy about this, and we now have kind of our AoE control going on. But at level 9, it is indeed time for our next tactics report. So what has changed since last time? We've gotten our Aura of Protection to defend ourselves. We've gotten our Aura of Conquest to help control our enemies. The damage it deals at this level is 4. Our strength has gone up to 18, which will help our to hit and damage. And we've gotten our Dragon Fear, which we can use a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus. It's our breath weapon, and that's times per long rest. So our tactics haven't really changed here. We're still going to be using Bless and activating our Form of Dread, and we're going to be attacking twice and using our bonus action half attack, but we're going to be using Dragon Fear as needed. Now, the important thing is, you can Bane and Command as needed here as well, but now that the frightened creatures can't move, they will be locked down very effectively. So if you land that fear, your targets won't be able to move. They probably won't be able to attack you or your allies, and they will just be stuck. And yeah, we're very happy about that. In terms of our damage, our save DC has gone up by 1 point thanks to our proficiency bonus, and we've gotten that extra 4 psychic damage, but we've got our attacks have improved a little bit with an extra +1 to damage. So our damage per round here, we are at 42.7 against an enemy with an armor class of 10 and no bonus to their saves, and we are at 33.9 against an enemy with an armor class of 16 and +6 to their saves. Since last time, this is an increase of 4.5 to 5.8 points, depending on the armor class, in the 15 to 16% range. It's a little bit, but it's not hugely significant. But the main things that we've gained from our levels here are a pretty darn massive amount of control. And going forward, we will be improving this. Yeah. So at level 10, we are a Paladin 9. We get more oath spells here, particularly third level spells are now available. Now, there are a lot of good third level spells like Spirit Shroud for damage, Aura of Vitality for really effective out of combat healing, Revivify to bring back allies, etc. But as a Conquest Paladin, we get Bestow Curse and Fear Always Prepared. Now, Fear is an incredibly good spell, and it's so powerful I need to cover exactly what it does. So the Fear spell takes an action. It is in a 30-foot cone, and it takes our concentration for 1 minute. So each creature in the area of our choice must make a wisdom save or drop whatever it's holding and be frightened of us for the duration. Now, specifically, this is an extra powerful kind of fear because while frightened, the creature must take the dash action on their turn and move away from you by the safest route unless there's nowhere to move. And they can make a save at the end of their turn if they're out of line of sight with you. Now, when we combine this with our aura, their dash doubles their speed, but their speed is 0. So 2 times 0 is still 0. There's obviously going to be places to move, so they still have to try to dash and try to move. But since they have no speed, they can't. So this means that any creature that fails to save and is in your aura, they will waste their action every turn trying to run away from you. And they don't get another save because they'll never break line of sight because they are stuck. So this is an incredibly powerful control spell. And I would plan on using this as much as you can going forward. Now, I understand that in some encounters you may encounter enemies that are fear immune. Those are very bad for this build. But overall, this spell combined with the aura is incredibly powerful control, and you can essentially get very large groups of enemies, depending on their spacing, to just skip their turns. And we want to use this. That said, when we're going to be doing damage per round, we're going to be assuming Spirit Shroud, but I will talk about this in the tactics sections. Now, at level 11, we are a Paladin 10, and we get another Aura of Courage. This one, extends 10 feet in every direction and makes us and our allies immune to fear. So we were already immune to fear while we were in our form of dread, so this doesn't really help us, but it could be helpful to our allies in the right situation. Our breath weapon also improves to 3d10 damage here, but we're probably going to be planning on using our breath weapon for Dragon Fear and exuding that roar. At level 12, we are a Paladin 11, and this means we get improved Divine Smite. So now we get a 1d8 of radiant damage to all of our attacks, including our half attack, and this is a very powerful feature. Doesn't require concentration or anything like that. We always have it, and this is a mini capstone, almost equivalent to Fighter's third attack, and is very powerful. This will help our damage per round a lot. And finally, at level 13, we are a Paladin 12, and we get our next ability score increase or feat, and I'm going to be bumping our strength to 20. Now, you don't have to do this here. I am planning on bumping our charisma later, and so if you want to lean heavier into control, I would bump your charisma to 18 here instead of bumping your strength, especially if your party has other damage dealers and you feel like you're hitting reliably. Being able to more reliably land fear in a real game honestly could be very good. The bump the strength helps our DPR, so that's what I'm going to be doing because it makes the numbers look better. But having a higher charisma here is very powerful, and we will be bumping our charisma later. So you can bump your strength now or later. Pick what feels best at your table in your specific setting. So it's time for our next tactics report and what has changed since last time. We have gained 3rd level spells and smite slots. We've gotten Fear and Spirit Shroud, and we have improved Divine Smite, and our strength is 20. So we now have kind of 2 plans here. For our control plan, our plan is going to be to cast Fear on our targets and activate our Form of Dread. We're then going to run in, positioning as many targets as possible in the aura and attacking. Now, if all of your targets failed their saves, pick the biggest, baddest guy and try to kill them. Or pick, if, some saved but some didn't, try to position all of them that didn't save in the aura and then attack one that didn't save. Well, attack one that made the save so you can lock them down with Fear. And then, use your command and Dragon Fear as needed here. But our damage per round plan, we're probably going to be activating Spirit Shroud in the first round. We'll attack something and then use Dragon Fear to potentially lock down a group of enemies. In round 2, we'll activate a Form of Dread and attack twice, and then from then on, we'll be attacking 3 times. Now, I know this violates the only one setup thing I like to do on dedicated damage per round builds, but because this is, more of a control build, I'm okay with having a little bit longer setup here, provided that we keep controlling our enemies the whole time, and this will let us do that. So for our damage per round plan, we now have an extra 2d8 of damage to all our hits and are at plus 10 to hit with a plus 5 to damage thanks to cap strength. Our wisdom save for our fear effect is 16, which is, it's okay. And enemies will take 6 psychic damage at the start of their turns if they're in the aura and afraid of us. Our divine smites have improved to 4d8. And our Warhorse, importantly, thanks to the feature it has where any spell that we cast that only targets ourselves can also target our Warhorse while mounted. Our Warhorse will also have the Spirit Shroud damage rider on it and the Spirit Shroud effect for slowing enemies down, which helps for control quite a bit. So, against an enemy with an armor class of 10 and plus 0 to their saves, we would be doing 78.6 DPR. And against an enemy with an AC of 17 and plus 7 to their saves, it would be 57. And since last time, we are seeing a pretty darn significant increase. We've got plus 35.9 points, or 84% against the lower armor class, and 23.1 points, or 68% against the higher armor class. And this is the biggest spike that we will see in this build in terms of the damage per round improving. And this is mainly because of that extra 2d8 that we've added to every attack. And our damage per round here honestly isn't bad. It is still, a bit behind those dedicated damage per round builds. But when we combine this with the amount of control that this character is pumping out, this is very, very solid. And another thing to consider here is not a lot of enemies in 5th edition have very good wisdom saves. And if they don't have a good wisdom save and aren't fear immune, they're probably going to be taking more damage than this because you're going to be landing your fear more reliably. All right, at level 14, we are at Paladin 13. This is another round of Oath spells, particularly the level 4 ones. And Conquest Paladins get Dominate, Beast, and Stone Skin. Stone Skin is a potentially powerful tanking spell, but the main spell I'm excited to get here is Find Greater Steed. This is a spell much like Find Steed that gives us a companion. It functions very similarly. It even has that line that, lets spells that target only us also target our mount while we are mounted. But the Find Greater Steed can be more powerful creatures. We're going to be taking a Griffin with this. And the Griffin is quite powerful, namely it gets 2 attacks. So that will help our damage per round quite a bit. It's also a lot beefier than the Warhorse. You can't have a Found Greater Steed and a Found Steed at the same time, so we'll be planning on using the Greater Steed from here forward. And I'll assume that you cast it on a prior day and we'll still have your 4th level slot or slots available. At level 15, we are a Paladin 14 and we get Cleansing Touch. So let's use our action to end a spell on a willing creature. This is okay, but not really something I'm planning on using, and is not really that great of a feature in my opinion. At level 16, we are a Paladin 15, and we get the Conquest Paladin mini capstone here, their penultimate feature called Scornful Rebuke. What this does is every time an enemy damages us, we get to make them take psychic damage equal to our charisma modifier. No reaction required, no limit on number of triggers, and this is potentially very powerful. If you have a wizard that blasts you with magic missile and they hit you 5 times, they take 5 times your charisma modifier in damage. Pretty cool. I'm not going to be including this in our damage per round because honestly, our enemies probably aren't going to get to attack us. But this is a nice thing to have around. You'll be able to pump out a little bit of extra damage in retaliation when you are hit and damaged. Importantly, if you take no damage, it doesn't matter. But cool feature, and will pump out damage in an actual game. Finally, at level 17, we are a Paladin 16. And we get another ability score increase our feat, and I'm going to bump our charisma here to 18. This will, help our save DC. It'll help all of our saving throws thanks to Aura of Protection. And our breath weapon here bumps up to 4d10 in its final increase. Now, if you took 18 charisma earlier, I would probably bump strength here, or if you're happy with your to hit bonus and want more survivability and better control, reliability, you could just bump your charisma to 20 instead. You could also take a feat like Warcaster if you really want that. And as I will talk about later, another version of the build will plan on using this. Now, we are very happy here, and let's go into our last tactics report. So what has changed since last time? We've found a greater steed in a griffin. We have 4th level spells and smites, and we have 18 charisma, as well as scornful rebuke. So what are our tactics now? So our control plan is largely the same. We're going to be using fear to control as many targets as possible, and then using our form of dread with our attacks to control anyone that succeeded on their save against fear, and we'll use command and dragon fear as needed to continue to lock down and control our enemies. Doing damage per round, we are still going to be using Spirit Shroud as we were last time. So in terms of our damage per round, our save DC has gone up, the damage enemies take at the start of their turn has gone up, and we have 5d8 Divine Smite on crit, as well as our Griffin, who has their bite attack doing 1d8 plus 1d8 radiant plus 4, and their claw attack doing 2d6 plus 1d8 radiant plus 4. So our damage per round against an enemy with an armor class of 10 and no bonus to their saves is 93.6, and against an enemy with an armor class of 18 and plus 8 to their saves, it would be 65.1. And since last time, this is an increase of 15 points against the very low armor class, or 8 points against the higher armor class. This is an okay increase, but obviously nothing like the spike last time. And, overall, our damage per round here, we are, 50% of the build I presented last week. We're 50% behind. That build is like 50 points ahead. But I'm pretty happy with this damage per round. There are a lot of things you could do to improve it if you wanted to lean heavier into that, but the main thing here is we are here for the control as well as pumping out a little bit of damage per round and being relatively survivable ourselves. And I'm quite happy with where our damage per round ended up, given that it was not really the main focus of our build. So, in summary, what is the overall score of this build? To get this number, I take all the numbers from all of our damage reports and I average them together. And this is a 54.7. Now, this is the worst damage per round build I've made at this point, but this damage per round build has a lot better control than all the other damage per round builds I've made. So I'm happy with this. I think we've arrived at a good point. Even though we are a primary control build, we still output a reasonable amount of damage, and that's a great thing to have because just locking enemies down and not killing them isn't as good as locking them down and killing them at the same time. So I think we're in a good place there. Now, if I was going to take this version of the build to level 20, I think I would honestly go Paladin 19. This gives us 5th level spells. It increases the range of all of our auras to 30 feet, as well as giving us another ability score increase or feat, which I would probably use to cap our charisma. So we'd have 20 strength and 20 charisma, and we would have 30-foot range aura of Conquest, 30-foot range aura of Protection. So when we activate our Dragon Fear or our Conquering Presence, Channel Divinity, we would potentially be able to control everyone in that radius. And now we have we are very effective here. Now, if you're going to be doing a 20th level one-shot, it might honestly just be worth it to skip the Undead Warlock dip and just do a 20th level Conquest Paladin, because the 20th level Paladin capstones are honestly insanely powerful. So that's something to consider. Now, I want to talk about the charisma-focused version of this build. Specifically, this one is Conquest Paladin 13 Undead Warlock 4 at the end. Now, on this version of the build, we are going to be using a quarterstaff and shield with the dueling fighting style. Now, this version of the build, our progression up to level 13, at least in my spreadsheets, was the same, 12 Paladin, 1 Warlock. And this build is a little better at level 6, thanks to dueling plus polearm master. And it's a little better at level 17, but it is behind at levels 9 and 13, and overall ends up a couple, like I think it's about 1.5 points lower in terms of overall score. But what the charisma version has, they have more reliable spells and fear effects thanks to having a higher charisma sooner. And they also have a few other features I kind of want to talk about. So in particular, the charisma version, so the way that we get charisma focused attacks is we are going to be using Pact of the Tome with Warlock at Warlock 3. This lets us get, in addition to other things, we get 3 cantrips from any class list as Warlock cantrips. And by taking the Shillelagh cantrip, this will bump the damage of our staff to a 1d8, as well as allow us to make our attacks with it with our spellcasting modifier, which is going to be charisma because it is a Warlock cantrip for us. So once we have this going, we will be able to make attacks with our charisma. Now, you could do this as soon as potentially level 9, or even level 8. If you went 5 levels of Paladin, 3 levels of Warlock, at level 8, you would have this going. Now, obviously, the disadvantage here is you would delay having your Aura of Protection and your Aura of Conquest and the Fear spell until character level 12. And so, honestly, this version of the build suffers a little bit in terms of, getting to what we designed the build to do. But if you're starting at a higher level, I think the charisma focused version is probably honestly better. Now, in terms of feats, we're still getting Polearm Master as our first feat. We are going to be getting Dragon Fear as our second feat. And for our third feat on this build, on this version, I actually wanted to take Warcaster. So for our invocations that we would get at Warlock 2, we would take Agonizing Blast to add our charisma modifier to our Eldritch Blasts, as well as Repelling Blast to push our targets away. Now, this combo of feats with Eldritch Blast is something that a lot of people call the Ghost Lance. And what this does is enemies provoke an opportunity attack when they enter your reach when you have a polearm, thanks to Polearm Master. But thanks to Warcaster, we can cast a spell as an opportunity attack. So we can cast Eldritch Blast, and we can push our target away from us thanks to Repelling Blast. Now, this is not as effective on at least until you land one when the enemy's right next to you, because you'll have disadvantage. But what this can potentially do is allow you to push an enemy away. If you want to use this combo on the other version of the build, don't take, you can delay your bump to 20 strength, and you will need to get some Warlock levels to have Agonizing Blast. And you could do this same kind of Conquest 13 Undead 4 by level 17. And this is pretty powerful, potentially pretty cool, and gives us another way to kind of control the battlefield with forced movement, and potentially pretty strong. Now, if you're going to be doing the charisma-focused version, I would honestly consider not doing a dragonborn and doing the bugbear for the extra reach. Particularly, this lets you slap enemies from 10 feet, and then on their turn they can't attack you. Overall, like I said, if you're going to be starting at a higher level, I would highly consider playing the charisma-focused version of this build. But if you're going to be playing this build from level 1, like all the way to a high level, the charisma version kind of sucks, and you're going to be feeling it compared to the strength version in those mid-levels, namely like 6 to 10. And honestly, 6 to 10 is the sweet spot of most D&D games, and feeling bad at those levels isn't going to be fun. So I'd recommend the strength version if you're starting level 1, but if you're starting, say, at least level 6, maybe even level 8, the charisma version will probably serve you a little bit better. Now, What about Hexblade or Divine Soul Sorcerer even dips? And like I said, this build has a lot of progression options once we've established those core features by level 8 or 9. And so I want to talk about the Hexblade version a little bit. So with one level of Hexblade, we get the charisma focused attacks. Now, we can't do that with a two-handed weapon unless we have at least 3 levels of Hexblade and Pact of the Blade. But, obviously the trade-off here is we lose the Form of Dread for the reliable on-demand fear effects. So if you're going to be doing a Hexblade Conquest Paladin, you really want to get the fear spell as quickly as possible. So fear is on the Warlock list. You could get it with 5 levels of Warlock, or you could get it with, the 9 levels of Paladin. So there's kind of some flexibility there in where you want to go, but you're probably not going to be having, your full combo will be online, a level 10 if you go Hexblade 1, Paladin's 9, or at level 12 if you go Paladin 7, Hexblade 5 to get fear. And like I said, what level you start at is critical, especially for a lot of builds kind of in this kind of group, the Warlock, Paladins, potentially Sorcerer, multi-class builds. They can feel pretty weak at early levels, and they take a long time to get all the things that you want. Like, for example, if you're doing Hexblade with Paladin, I could see, in the end having, say, 3 levels of Hexblade Paladin to use a Reach Glaive with Charisma, 7 levels of Conquest Paladin to get the Aura, and then the rest of your levels Divine Soul Sorcerer to get, Meta Magic, Spirit Guardians, that kind of thing. That could be a really powerful build, but getting there will take a long time, and all the pieces will be difficult to assemble. So, one of the things that you can have here is there are so many things that look good, and honestly, it's, in my opinion, what I would call too many ingredients in the soup. We've got so many things that we want, we're mixing them all together, and you end up with something that's bland and doesn't really work, at least until a high level. So, especially with these builds kind of in this category, that, again, Warlock, Paladin, Sorcerer, it's important to consider what level you're starting and what level you're ending. If you're beginning at a reasonably high level and can make an effective character, it's a lot easier to do these particular combinations. But for builds that are hungry for, reasonably high levels in multiple classes, it's difficult to get your full combo online in time that's meaningful. And I don't know about you, but let's say you're playing a campaign that goes to level 12. I wouldn't want to suffer through, 10 levels of being mediocre to have, 2 levels of glorious power when everything is online and it's like the last maybe 5 sessions of your game. I'd much rather have a build that is powerful and fun throughout, even if I'm sacrificing a little bit of power at the end. So that's a very important thing to consider with these builds in particular. This whole kind of, again, this charisma, multi-class, Paladin, Sorcerer, Warlock. They're very powerful at high levels, but again, you have to get there. So overall with this build, I'm pretty pleased about where it ended up, and being mainly Paladin with this little bit of Warlock is pretty cool. And, this build was a challenge to create. Given the flexibility and the number of options I wanted, making something that was powerful but felt cohesive throughout, I'm happy with where we arrived here. And I think our, potentially evil Conquest Undead dragonborn taking over the world in their Undead patron's name could be a fun character to play in the right campaign, or potentially even a good bad guy for your group to encounter. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I had a lot of fun making this build. It was one of my more complex ones to put together, and I think builds from this category generally are. So thanks for watching. If you made this far, I'm going to try to present another potentially spooky build before the end of the month, and hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.